All right. I think the first place to start is actually number 2 in the discussions, the outcome of our meeting with the sheriff.
Right.
In meeting with the sheriff, there were 2 things. There was some current items, which I call the miscellaneous list. Did you guys print your copies?
Ron.
Okay.
I didn't have it though, I didn't print it, I'm sorry.
That's
Todd.
okay.
I saw it, but I didn't print it. That's your number 124, right?
Yeah. Going through the list very quickly, the official salaries, that money we can change in the budget, that's not a problem. It was set aside elsewhere. We weren't sure of his exact amount. And then along with the sheriff's salary goes the furtherance of justice, because that's a percent of his salary. So that first and third line will be taken care of. That's not an issue.
Yeah, okay.
The second one, the contractual services, this relates to the CAD.
Kent State.
Yeah, I don't know what you call it that we
Contract?
pay to Kent State. I don't know if it's a service agreement or, but anyway, we pay Kent State for handling our CAD programming.
That's a dispatch program, is that?
So the 35-ish thousand is for the dispatch and the 911. And somehow that, and then there was another $30,000 bill that came about from the NDTs. And somehow we needed a module for those to work as well. So now the bill's up to that 64,000. That was considered by the commissioners last year when the 911 talk started about 4 years ago. It was indicated that the sheriff was going to need to figure out how to move that into his budget. At the time, it was the first piece. But it was never really brought up continuously after that. When the sheriff elected to put the MDTs into his car, at that time, the sheriff mentioned that if we would put up the capital costs, the one-time costs, and was it last year or the year before, Joanne, do you remember that we put up the 78,000? I can't remember.
I think it's, Dennis Massimi was still here, so it had to be.
Might have been 2 years
before.
ago.
2 years.
Anyway, the commissioners did put up money to make an initial purchase of these MDTs. The sheriff at that time agreed that he would absorb the operating costs. Now, at that time, there was around 21,000 for basically cell service to the car, those type of things. But the other 30,000 then was a part of that, because that's an annual expense. So, long story short, at the end of last year, the commissioners knew about this but did not put it into the budget. Now, whether that would still be this board's decision or not needs to be discussed. The uniforms, both the 16,000 that's in the fourth line and the 10,000 that is in the bottom line, those are increases from the union contract that the board did agree to. I'll bring up again, at the time the board signed the contract, we had no idea the financial consequences of it. Ron Habowski brought up the fact that there was the 2 1/4 to the salaries, but these are the little details that really never get brought forward. But now Ron is bringing it forward, and he's finally calculated that the new contract is calling for these agreements to the uniform. The key is we've signed the contract, we've agreed to the contract, so we probably need to put these amounts in. But I would just make a note again that when these contracts come forward, having a financial analysis in hand would be nice, so that we understand the full cost of the contract, not just the 1% or whatever it is for the salaries.
And Todd, would the attorney do that, or who would do that? The sheriff?
Well, I don't know who's in the negotiations. I believe that Ron Ross would for the sheriff.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
I think he's in the negotiations. And then, for example, I know Gene actually did it for water. You'll recall he had a net.
Well, yeah.
He gave us the net because they took away here and they added there. Gene did that himself. I think Kevin helped him. Who else do we have? Those are the major ones. The dog warden, Dave does, but his contracts are actually fairly simple. And then I think we have 1 or 2 people in building inspection.
Okay, so probably Ron Ross would
Very
be the
easy. So,
one. Okay.
yeah, the sheriff is the big one. But going forward, that's something to just keep in mind when those contracts come. The only other 2 items then there, are the inmate food, inmate medical. We knew that those were probably gonna be more, however, it was decided by the board at the time that we would hold off and put the actual amounts in. Once we reach the current amount, I think we have 980,000 in there for food. We suspected we were going to surpass that this year with the opening of the jail, depending on when it opens and how full it gets. We decided that we were gonna increase that when the time comes. So in my mind, the only thing on this list that needs addressed is the 64,000. We would do the sheriff's salary.
Do you have a
the
list for
furtherance of
me, Todd?
justice. Yes, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Thank you.
So we would do the sheriff's salary and the furtherance of justice, that's the first and third line. Those we did have the money setting aside, we just needed to know how much at the time.
Okay.
We would do the uniforms, again, as part of our agreed contract. However, those are on top of what we had thought of at the 2.25. And then we would, in my mind, still hold off on the inmate food and the inmate medical until we continue to see what those increases are actually gonna be towards the end of the year.
Now, will they have enough though to get through the year with that medical and
Well,
food? I mean,
that, last year, I think in the food, they were 20,000, they had 20,000 extra. And in the medical, I think they had 40 or 60,000 extra.
Okay.
So if we don't get any more prisoners, they probably have more than enough. The key is we're not expecting that.
Okay.
But because they had some extra, there's some wiggle room already, and then we would be anticipating up to, in fact, I've anticipated even in excess of these amounts, should the jail fill
And plus, once we open the new pod.
Right.
the
Well,
new
that's what
pod, yeah.
that's what this is in anticipation of.
Okay.
Now, if we open the new pod and not many more come for the rest of the year, do we know yet when we're opening, September-ish maybe? Is that it's
Yeah.
good, it's not gonna be before that,
No.
though.
No.
So, originally, we were talking early this year, April or something. I
We were
think was
talking
the original.
March or April, and then it
So,
got moved to July.
As that opening keeps moving on, these costs keep moving on too, so I would recommend still waiting on those.
Okay.
So then the only thing really to consider for the board is the 64,000. And we don't necessarily
Has
need the
that been
answers
paid
today.
already, Todd?
Probably.
35,000 plus 30?
Yeah, probably, it's usually paid around the middle of the year, I think.
Okay.
And again, it is necessary without this CAD component,
They can't use those MDTs then.
it's not a very functional system.
Well, I think we almost
Yeah.
have to approve that now.
I mean, unfortunately, I don't see how we can get around it.
So that takes care of the miscellaneous list. Then the staffing, at the meeting, it was discussed that they would need 3 1/3 to 3 2/3 posts. And that means a post is a person in that spot 24/7.
3 shifts.
Right, so a post represents roughly 5.1, 5.2 workers. So if you take 3 1/3 to 3 2/3, that roughly comes out to 17 or 18 people. Ron Rost had indicated 17 at the meeting. And so that's what I have currently on the request list. That includes a person in medical, which in this particular case, my understanding was the architect had assumed that area would be watched via video. However, Ohio law does not allow for that type of surveillance. Ohio law requires a deputy physically to be in that
Okay.
section if there is a prisoner there. So that was an oversight, I guess you could call it, that we need a person there.
Can you say in medical, are you talking about in the medical
This
pods
is,
or?
this is in the old women's
Section.
new remodeling where we're
Mhm.
creating those isolation cells. And
Yeah.
I don't know how many there are, 4 or 6, I can't
6,
remember.
and if there's
Okay.
one person in one of those.
Then you have
Then
to
you
have
have
an
to have a
officer
person
there.
there.
Whereas, like I said, the architect had designed it for cameras alone, which Ohio law doesn't allow for. So that was one of the posts that they feel they need. Another one, you'll recall, central control is currently right there as you walk in, behind that back window. We're moving it to the new section just because it has all the nice electronics and whatnot. In that new section, the sheriff would like to have 2 people present there at all times instead of the normal 1. Part of that is because now that they're sort of off on the corner, in case something needs to be reacted to. He wants one person to be able to leave and quickly handle
Mhm.
that. Whereas in their current location, they felt they could call because there were more people always around the
Yeah.
area. So central control would go from one person to two people, so that's an increase of one post. So that gets you to two posts right now.
When
They
you say
also-
post, do you mean positions?
A post is 5 people,
A post?
Either 5.1 or 5.2.
because you need to keep a person there 24/7.
Okay.
So to keep one person 24/7, you need to hire roughly 5 people to
Right.
accomplish it.
For vacations and sick days and,
Exactly.
yeah.
Then in the new part of the jail, they feel the existing staff can cover the main portions, but they will need an extra rover. And that's a person who goes
Just looks around.
to cell and then between the cells, and then as well walks, to get other people or other area, and is just sort of a backup in case something would break out, a fight or an emergency or anything like that. The rover is kind of the flow person that helps with that. They feel they need an additional one there because of the numbers that are in that new section. And then with the leaving of central command going to the new section, that leaves that, as you walk in, and go straight back, there was that glass window where you go, like if you want to visit.
Mhm.
Well, central command leaves there, there's no one there. So they feel they need at least a reception style area there for 2 shifts, or what we would call 2/3 of a post. They don't need it there from the 8 at night to 8 in the morning, because they don't allow visitation during those times. But from roughly 8 in the morning to 8-ish at night, or 11, I think it's 11 at night. They'll need someone there to receive people. In particular, they need to receive attorneys and medical professionals who get to see the inmates in person. All other people are gonna go to these video consultations once that's set up. So that would be the 2/3 of a post. When we say the 3 and 2/3. So that amounts to roughly 17 people. That amounts to roughly $1,015,000 just in salaries and benefits. That number will vary slightly. That assumes mostly new people without any experience. So if we were able to get experienced people, which we would hopefully be looking for in some of these, just due to the training and the capacity needs right now, that number could go up a little, although not significantly. It could go up to $1,200,000 then, when you add in the medical benefits, depending on whether these workers are single
Mhm.
or family.
Family.
Obviously, if all 17 of them were family, we could be even up to $1,300,000.
So we should hope for the best and plan for the worst.
Correct. So right now, I have roughly 1.2 million on the list, as what that request would entail. So, moving to that.
But no, I'm assuming, Todd, obviously, some of this is gonna be phased in at a.
Well, we had discussions with Judge Pittman, was that the end of last year? Where she indicated they feel they can fill the new section of the jail fairly quickly. I mean, you recall
Mhm.
that. So it's possible that come September, October, we'll need to be fully operational at that moment, that there won't be much of a phase-in terms of slowly adding prisoners. If that's the case, these 17 workers need to be up and running, and it takes 10 weeks before these people are even allowed to be on their own operationally. So we're talking hiring, in July, in order to have these people ready for a possible September opening. So it does need acted on somewhat quickly if we're going to do any action on it, in order for that all to be ready.
However, Todd, in the same breath, we're told that if we give some of these things that are wanted for treatment, it will eliminate people going to jail. So, I mean,
And the answer there is yes, but that's more of a long-term,
Okay, so it's not right
you've got
away.
the immediate flow.
Okay.
Hopefully as those programs continue working,
Okay.
that decreases the pressure overall. Similarly with probation, we had to increase our probation staff while we kept people out of the jail. But the fact is, once you open the jail day 1, you can't decrease that probation staff because
Oh,
there's still all the
sure,
people in the
yeah.
system, and probation could be, 2-3
Right.
years. So slowly that may take the pressure off probation, but it's not gonna be day one. Same thing with treatment, it's not gonna take the pressure off the jail day one, but hopefully in the long term, it will at least keep us from needing to build another pod.
Oh, come on,
Soon.
don't even say that. Please don't say that.
No, the sheriff said that.
So, so if you look on this sheet, right towards the middle there, you see that 1,200,000 and that 124,000 highlighted. We'll get to the data processing highlights in a minute there. At the bottom of that sheet, I have made some comments. You know, we aren't being blindsided by this totally. 17 was a little higher than we had hoped, but it wasn't out of the realm of possibility. In fact, at one time, 21 was thrown out as a figure in terms of people. So we have been trying to prepare for this day for quite a while. We have created roughly an 800,000 cushion between what I call reliable revenues and general expenses, routine expenses. So the county roughly brings in 42.5 million a year, and we're roughly up to around 41.8 in regular spending. Now, an elevator breaks at Riddle, it takes our spending high, but that's a one-time thing. So when I say routine, I kind of mean salaries and pens and paper and just all those type of things. We roughly have that $800,000 gap. So that helps us bridge some of this. We have also, in getting that gap over the last 4 years, we have built up a cash balance. So if you go back 4 years ago, we created roughly a $150,000 balance when Deb retired. You know, we've slowly been growing that gap, which means our cash balance has also slowly been growing. I have told the commissioners that some of that cash balance, I believe, should be used to slowly narrow the deficit. In other words, we don't need to make all the cuts next year because we have built up a cash balance that we can slowly run down. And so long as we are cognizant of the fact that we need to bring that budget back in line, we have created ourselves the room to do it over a few years. And some of the ways that we can accomplish that are not just through cuts, but it's in slowing expansion as well. So when you look last year, revenues grew nicely, but we only gave a 1% raise. That helped create a cushion. Next year, if revenues continue to grow like they are, sales tax is doing very well right now, if we keep those raises modest, that helps us bridge this gap without needing to cut, which I think is preferable to most people. Everyone wants a 3% raise, but if a 3% raise means there might be cuts 2 years from now, I think people would prefer the modest raise and then no cuts coming. So those are things for you to consider as we enter these budget cycles. The second little section there, the non-labor expenses, we're talking the extra meals, the extra medical, the extra electricity, air conditioning, all those type of things. We had estimated between 350 and 700,000. 350 is probably a wishful thinking number where we don't have a lot of extra expenses because the numbers at the jail didn't increase rapidly. So I think we're beyond that number right now anyways. 700,000 is closer to a worst case. We're at maximum capacity from day one. Those numbers are also for a whole year, which, you know, if we're not open till September, you're only talking a quarter of those numbers for this year, but we need to anticipate them going into next year. So that's the part that, you know, when we talk staffing, all those type of things, we don't want to lose track of that number, that there are going to be additional operational costs. And then we have the estimated labor at 1.2 million. So we're roughly talking $1.5 million to $2 million onto next year's budget that we need to find. We have 800,000 of that right now that we can use. We need to begin finding the rest. The good news is, for once, the state may actually be helping. I'm still not holding my breath, but the state is talking of compensating the indigent defense that Commissioner Clyde brought up last week. If they would hold true and compensate 100% and not take anything from anywhere else, that would roughly be $1 million, in which case we would be in very good shape in terms of just breaking even on the jail portion. So we still wait to see that. I know they're in negotiations with the Senate to finalize the overall bill, but that's something to keep our eye on there. Again, on the fourth line, I mentioned the cash balance that we built up. there is some logic to using some of our cash to take time in making these decisions. Of course, you don't want to take too much time and run that cash too low, but we did build it up with the intention of doing that. And then the bottom caveat, a bit of a downer, all that assumes that everything in the additional fund ends. So you currently have almost $1 million in labor in terms of the additional road patrol, the additional probation, and the additional corrections officers, plus all of the treatment programs are coming out of that fund. So if we would not have an additional revenue source, most, if not all of that would need to end, and we would still be looking for a little room to try and balance, depending on where the state comes in on the indigent effect. So that's where we stand in terms of just a really satellite image of the county's finances, in terms of the jail opening and that type of thing. Did you have questions on that portion?
Let's see here.
So Todd, are you saying the plan would be to give the sheriff right now everything but the medical and the food on this sheet?
Right now, based on everything I've seen, I think that you should do everything but the medical and food on this list, which is roughly 100,000, and up to another 600,000 for him to begin hiring staffing.
Okay, so.
And what I would do is give him 500,000 and then tell him whatever the medical is we will put in, which could be up to another 100,000. And that would be 600,000, which would cover roughly a half a year, which if he would begin hiring people July, you know, that would put it right at where it should be, in terms of half a year of hiring.
Okay, so you're talking a total of 600,000.
Correct, for a half a year worth of that staffing,
Okay.
yes. I would do 500 now with the caveat we'll cover the medical. And again, the medical could be up to another 100,000, making it the 6 total. Does that make sense? So we would be setting aside roughly 700,000 additional that we hadn't anticipated.
And that's for the things that come up, like the furniture, the radios, because that's stuff that is
That was
not
the other-
included in our contingency.
Correct. And the radios, what did we get, 76,000 as a quote for those? But they aren't ready to proceed with it. That hasn't come forward quite yet.
No,
As being ready to be purchased, but that is coming.
that's gonna be more effective when the new pod has to open, because they currently have radios that are operational, although maybe not the best, but they're still operational in the current areas.
So we're increasing his budget, like 98,227 for the deficits for the listed line items above, other than the inmate medical, inmate food. We're gonna increase it 500,000, allowing him to start hiring new people to train for the jail, plus we'll add medical.
100,000 for the health benefits. Well, whatever the health benefits. So if he hires everyone that happens to be single, that number will be very low. If he hires everyone that has family, that number will be very high. We have never asked our departments to consider that in a hiring, and they shouldn't. So the
Right.
key is we'll just tell them whatever your medical comes in, we will then cover that too.
Okay, so we're planning for 600,000, but we're only gonna
Correct.
fund him 500?
We'll put 500 in and in a letter or whatever, however we want to communicate it. So the health benefits come in, we will make additional also.
And then what was the other contingency amount, 500, what's that for unexpected expenses? Did you say something about adding?
Nothing to that yet, no,
Oh.
but that is aside for other things that come up.
Okay,
That would be my recommendation as of right now for just the jail.
okay, just
Um,
these two.
Staying on this list, then, we also agreed-ish, I guess, to the 100,000 for storage on data processing, which is that second highlighted section.
I have a question on that,
Mhm.
because we haven't passed that resolution yet.
No.
How did we get to this? I mean, I remember Brian specifically saying that it would last 8 to 10 years, but they added more people
They added
to
more
that
departments.
that did not pay for it. They
And
just
that-
added them.
Yeah, I
And that's
think-
not fair to the people that actually paid for that, and now they're coming to us saying, hey, we need to hire a new server. And then the other question was, Todd, I think you had noted that there was one department that did not pay their share yet?
Right, so what I think, the way I think you need to proceed with is we have to get the storage increase
Yeah.
the 100,000. I think we still insist on getting the usage allocations.
Yeah, he's supposed to get that
And we
to us.
compare that to what we charged versus what's being used. If we were off, I know they've said Water Resources, but Water Resources paid almost 100,000.
Mhm.
They were one of the largest payers, they just didn't join till later. But we can analyze, did Water Resource overuse compared to what we originally thought? Perhaps we go back to Water Resource. Or if there are departments, for example, RPC, that would be for the board to decide whether that's going to become an in-kind donation towards their operations, much like we do rent space and all that type of thing, or whether you wanted to ask them for a one-time allocation. Most of this was one-time, we don't charge ongoing. It was a one-time sort of buy-in to the way we worded it was buy space in the system. And we took, at the time, there were 22 servers, and we combined them to 4. And basically, everybody bought space within those 4. So my recommendation right now would be to do the 100,000 from the general fund, get it done, but
Okay.
check on this usage, and we'll analyze it over the next month or two, and then we can come back to you with a better picture of, was it just that programs are bigger now and we really did misanticipate the
Yeah.
usage, or was it that there is a large chunk that needs accounted for, and we can come back to you with that?
And I remember them saying that Board of Elections already had a purchase order in for it, and they,
That's,
what was that about?
Well, they did put a purchase order in late last year, and I'm not even sure how it got in because it wasn't for the full amount. It was a useless purchase order. I have never considered it as encumbered funds because I was aware of the fact that it was a meaningless purchase order. So in terms of this decision, that doesn't mean anything because I'd already accounted it as a useless.
Because when they say they put in a purchase order, it's coming from us anyways.
Right, and
I
that's,
mean-
they had a budget surplus, so they hurried up and put in a purchase order. But again, we knew the system at that time was even more than 100,000, and they were the only ones that put in anything at all. So
Yeah.
it was just kind of bizarre, they had this purchase order, in fact, it was to the wrong company, I mean, there was a lot wrong with it. Anyway, I didn't count that as spent anyways, so it's not saving us anything that it's being canceled, I
Okay.
guess, in that regard. But we did
Okay.
anticipate that we were needing more storage.
Okay.
Lloyd has mentioned it, even though they didn't formally put it in their budget presentations for last year, it has been mentioned that we were running out of space. The one thing that we hadn't anticipated at all was the second item, which is the additional staff member that they are requesting, and they would like to hire that person soon, which I'm assuming means they would like an answer soon.
No, their answer, their logic to that, and maybe Kathleen or Vicki knows more on this, was due to the people that came in to audit the systems for the Board of Elections is causing all kinds of havoc with it.
Well, they pointed out a lot of flaws,
Okay,
and so IT is currently trying to remedy all those flaws, which is taking an enormous amount of time
okay.
to try and counter them, and a lot of these flaws aren't just things you fix once, it's, you gotta constantly, as the bad people update their techniques, you gotta update yours.
Right.
And so what they're coming back to you saying is, as a result of that study and some of the deficiencies in our system, it is taking far longer than what they used to spend to constantly combat this possibility of cyber attacks and data sabotage and all these other type of things. And they have devoted more and more of John's time to that activity, which means he is getting to less of the other types of things he used to do, which are all these tickets that are now building up. And so their contention is they would like to hire a full-time person to take over the work that he used to do.
Is that still, you think, an accurate amount? That sticky note?
Yes. Yeah.
Because that would cover at least the first year.
Yeah, although that's one time, this is ongoing.
Well,
But, yeah.
I understand that, but.
Now, that 55 is a whole year, which again,
Mhm.
you're taking
It'd be
roughly half of
prorated
that for
this
the rest
year,
of this
yeah.
year. So that still needs discussion by the board and or an answer. I don't need an answer today unless you were ready to, but that is something that
And
we'll
where
keep
would
on your
we
radar.
pull the funds from for that position?
That money tree you've got.
Right now, that would just join this overall issue of you are
Adding
going to begin
additional
spending
staff.
more in 2019, we may still break even, but into 2020, you are going to begin spending more than you bring in, and you need to find a correction to that. And it doesn't necessarily have to happen in 2020, but it has to happen within a few years of that. So this would add to that. My recommendation has always been, and it's part of why I didn't recommend the grant writer yesterday, despite the obvious benefits to that, I would encourage you not to add a position right now that you would consider cutting later. So if this is a position that you would consider cutting as part of cuts, and I'm not saying that we need cuts, but I'm saying imagine if you did, would this position be one of the first ones we would take? If it is, then don't even add it. But if it isn't, if this position is essential to the functioning of the county and we would cut elsewhere, should the need come, then I would say you add this position and then you deal with what needs dealt with when that time arises, which is coming soon, by the way.
Well, the other question is we've decided that whole punch list that they gave for the Board of Election, that we're gonna review that and seeing what exactly we can, because there's no way we can feasibly fund everything they're recommending.
No, those are all one-time things. You know, at one time, we had set aside $1.5 million. The original estimates came in closer to 2.8. At that point, we began cutting back. The architect didn't want to participate to the degree that we were cutting back because they didn't feel it was an appropriate project at that point. So then we talked about doing a punch list. We had talked early last year about possibly up to $300,000, which is what I've always had in my mind of needing to prepare for. We're currently at 75, just with the electrical and a few of those other things. So we're still in fairly good shape on that.
I think she's talking
I'm
about the
talking
list that
about-
came up with the cyber security and the different changes that they had indicated they wanted to see within our building.
So are we talking
The
two different
physical
things?
changes.
What
He's
he's
talking
doing
about
with-
the list that you and Shannon
No,
sat
no,
with.
I
Like the
know
electrical.
that. No, I'm talking about what they're reviewing with
My
Lloyd.
understanding,
And
then
the cyber person.
Yeah, it's the same person who gave us that punch list.
my understanding with hiring the Pathfinder was that the state wanted these reviews, and then the state might possibly put some money towards securing the Board of Elections areas. I don't know if I was just dreaming that, or if that really was what
It
was
was
brought
wishful
up.
thinking, Todd.
Did we, speaking of
That
this-
was always my thought, because the state wanted everyone to do these Pathfinders and then get the information in. In terms of that, I was never under the impression that we were going to begin correcting things immediately. I know like bollards out, you know, so people couldn't ram cars in and stuff, those are some of the things that were discussed. I had never anticipated proceeding with that list. That doesn't mean we can't, but anything that you do want to do from that list then would be something we hadn't
Affect
originally
others, yeah.
anticipated, yeah.
What, was I gonna ask? Okay. All right, well, that answers that question.
Okay. So we've actually got all the answers on the sheriff. I can bring all these funding changes Thursday.
Okay.
I will bring the 100,000 for IT Thursday.
Mhm.
Do you want to hold off on the personnel request and have more time to discuss?
You know, personally, I think they really need that person. Because John is just, you know, he's doing 3 jobs right now, and he's neglecting a job that they need someone for.
And is this like an ongoing issue you see?
Well, they're
Or-
needing 2 people, but obviously they know there's no way they're gonna get 2 people. So,
Yeah, because the security issues that they're trying to correct are ones that constantly have to be updated. So that has become sort of a new job under John, and
Mhm.
it's taking up more and more of his time.
Okay.
And so that's why they're hoping for this other person to take some of those other items off his plate.
do you have
I
an
suppose
opinion?
they looked at things that they're doing that could possibly be contracted out at maybe at a reduced rate that would free up their employees. right?
I think he gave us something on
Did
that,
he?
Joanne,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
And it would cost more.
That was.
Okay.
Yeah, it was like 120,000.
Was it?
It was like X amount of dollars times $1,000.
Well, that was for the security, cyber security. I think Joanne's talking about even, you know, printer maintenance. I mean,
Printer
those
maintenance,
type
things
of
like
things
that he's
they-
got people dedicated to that might not be
I think
that
he gave us
expensive,
like
because you
3
wouldn't call anybody for printer work or repairs unless you needed to
We
have
needed
them.
something, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I know that Lloyd and I have talked about that already, and he
Mhm.
was like trying to get information from the departments on how many printers they had and so forth, and as much as he could, because he didn't have all the information that was needed. But I was thinking that, his idea in the background was if we can get some of this, then that would free up Shannon or,
Right.
Brenda or someone else that could do some of the other things that are waiting to be done possibly.
Depending on, I think, that second person that they're wanting within the next couple years, maybe, depending on the cost, the outsourcing, I don't know.
Well,
That
is
might
that-
be an idea.
Is that a discussion item at data processing ever?
Yeah.
As a regular
Yes.
to kind of
Yeah.
help do that? I know at one time we were trying to move to get away from desktop printers and move to copiers, which was helping immensely. I don't know. But, I mean, just little things like that.
I know
that
he's
slowly
on some
move things up.
consistency
Mhm.
on what we
Yeah.
have, which would help immensely. Kathleen, do you have any thoughts on that additional person with IT?
No, I mean, I defer to you and your data
Okay.
processing discussions.
Do we need more time on that, or do you want it brought Thursday? It does not matter to me, and I think they would like to hire
Well, it
soon, but I don't
sounds like
think it's
they
urgent.
do need it, but the question is, the funding. I mean, the sheriff just, with everything gonna transpire. Now granted, luckily, it's not gonna all transpire this year, but then if that levy doesn't pass, then I'm just skeptical, but like you said, it sounds like it's something that's needed.
Is the rationale that they're providing on that in your data processing discussions, the wait time on the help
Tickets?
desk tickets?
What
What does it translate to, 100 pending tickets? Is that, are some of those?
Well, they're just getting more and more behind is what's happening. And then, things just keep coming up, and it will affect the cybersecurity, because we just don't have the people. And I do think that's very important, because like Todd said, the guys out there that are doing this, they're constantly updating their stuff, and they're getting smarter all the time, and, we need to do the same.
And Todd, again, this would come from which funds?
This would be general fund right now, entirely.
How many departments have their own IT staff person? Is it just DJFS?
The courts. Well, JFS does, although they use our servers, which our IT repairs the servers that they need, but their people do like their peripherals, their computers. The courts then have their, what's his name?
Gordon.
Gordon.
Yeah.
He does the peripherals, he keeps their printers running, he does a lot of work with the cameras for video, witnesses and those type of things. He sets all that up and makes sure those are running smoothly. And then the clerk has people who help facilitate court view and keep that system running. But that's all they deal with. They don't even go to their own machines within their department. That's purely court view. That's
Prosecutor?
everything I'm aware of. Prosecutor does not have a dedicated person. They use our IT.
Does the sheriff?
The sheriff does not. He uses our IT.
County engineer doesn't. DD does, obviously, they have
Yeah,
their own, he's a
they're
member of
kind
the
of their own
board.
little thing.
Not sure, you guys take care of your own,
Yeah, we're independent.
yeah.
I know that
Juvenile court would be us.
They're on their own.
Mhm.
the
Yeah, that's
development
not
board
them.
just
Even the detention center side.
did a contract to do.
To outsource.
Yes.
It is becoming more and more popular. And as they move into your area and have clients, they keep more people in your area, which means your service is better. So I don't know if that's something to revisit. At one time, it was more of a fringe, and it would take up to a day to get something fixed and all those type of things.
I think Lloyd does have that in his mind, the
Has it?
outsourcing, yes, he's definitely.
So do we prefer to wait right now and think about that more?
Well, I'm ready to go forward with it, but
I'm fine with going forward
Go
with it.
forward? So I will bring that as well then,
Okay.
on Thursday. Let me just make sure I've got. So we just spent a lot of money. And again, those, that 55 obviously would be prorated to whatever.
Right, right.
And the 100,000 is a one-time.
That's, in fact, it was 100,464 or something like that.
Yeah.
But it was- They had the quote, he was trying to even talk that down further, but.
Right.
That was the current quote that we had. So then that takes us to, what I see as interlinked, but they don't need to be, the possibility of the levy along with these treatment and prevention proposals. And I don't know how you want to begin that discussion or where you want to start. I think there are a couple items in those proposals that are perhaps more, urgent isn't the right word, but with the schools ending here in a
Timing.
couple weeks, I think they would like
Mhm.
answers before school's out. It doesn't mean they have to have them, but that would be the school proposal for $314,000, which is those case managers that help connect people to services. The town hall, Too Good program, where we contributed $100,000 to expand what was already being done.
What about the scrams for the birds and all that?
So the scram, they have money to probably get them through, I think it's mid-August is when we started. Similarly with the drug court probation officer, we told them we would fund 1 year, and I don't think he was hired till the end of August.
It was later.
So they have a little bit of time, plus they're, you know, it's not like they take a break all summer. I mean, we're in constant communication with them, so you could either proceed with all of them right now. I was just pointing out the two that I think, I know the superintendents, when they've come, they've indicated they would like to know before school's out. Again, it doesn't mean we have to act before then, it's just
Right.
reminding you of their desire. There is some questions regarding how we would be able to extend funding to something like Hope Village, Enough is Enough, agents, free agents for recovery. Hope Village does at least have licensure, they are just not a nonprofit. Enough is Enough and free agents for recovery are not
But could they not
licensed, I guess
contract,
is the right word, is that the
could
right
they not
word?
contract with the sheriff?
Hope Village?
Yes.
Could, absolutely.
Because I talked to
And
Judge
the courts
Doherty
could do
on
that.
Thursday, and she thinks that that program's really worthwhile and we should consider it. I mean, they're out there doing some of it now, but they can do more with it. And I guess they weren't happy to hear that it may not be considered because he's a for-profit. But I thought, just because it's for-profit, Mental Health and Recovery said that they could not fund it, but it doesn't mean that the sheriff could not contract. Is that not
Right.
correct?
The only caveat is as soon as the sheriff and or the courts enter into the contract, it can only be for people that are currently in the system. And that does preclude them servicing people from the minute they are
Getting,
released.
yes.
So, you know, once they're out, they can't do follow-up with with money that we would be
Todd,
providing.
what was it-
Obviously, with other funding. it could
What was
not
the
fund
third
it.
thing that you mentioned? You mentioned the Hope Village and Enough is Enough, and there was a third one that,
Free agents for recovery, that bottom one.
oh, I see, number 11.
Yeah,
Okay.
they were doing some kind of training, peer training or something with their
Yeah.
proposal.
Is this after they get out, this free agents for recovery? after-
That's to keep people, that's for current drug users, whether they've been convicted or not.
Okay.
To try and help them navigate the system is that one faith-based as well? I believe it is. That and Enough is Enough, it has a faith-based element to it, which are not certified as mental health treatment, so to speak.
Okay.
And so that becomes much more difficult to get funding to, particularly for the individuals who are not currently part of the criminal justice system.
You know, this number 8, adult probation's day reporting, are we doing that now? No, it says new.
Yeah, I think on
I thought I
a,
had heard we were doing
I think
that.
on a trial, see how this works, very small scale, they're
Okay.
they would like to expand it considerably, I think
Okay.
is the idea. Did you get that under that, Joey?
Yes, it's the same thing that Family and Community Services is proposed
Yeah,
on number 3.
Yeah, number 3 and number 8 are roughly the same
Yeah.
activity.
Oh.
So if you wanted that activity, you would only need to
Pick
fund one
one.
of those two.
How much funding are we
Yeah, how
talking
much
about?
money do we
This
have?
is
So,
confusing.
All 5 of them is like 558, 542, is that not correct?
I seen how much is available.
Oh,
yeah, the whole list is around 1.2 million.
1.2?
So in my mind, I have always kept the additional funding and the regular sales tax funding is separate. And so in my mind, the problems that we just talked about are problems for the regular fund, and this money is not there to help with that. That's just my crazy idea, though. You guys are welcome to take some of this money to help solve those problems.
Sure.
So
There's
the
nothing
800,000
preventing it.
cushion, is you talking about general
That's in the
revenue
main
fund?
general, correct,
Okay.
correct. So within this fund then, we roughly have, I think it was 1.2 million. Joanne and I are recommending we keep 500,000 of that set aside until the jail is truly done. And a good example of that is the radios that came up, right there was 100,000 that is not included in the contractual contingencies. So that's why we're saying set aside 500,000 until that jail
Yeah.
is totally built and running. So if you take that off, you have roughly 700 to 800,000. That 700 to 800,000 is all that you have to work with then through the remainder of whatever it is that you're
Yeah.
going to do.
I had, the last time we met Todd, you said we had 1.4 and you wanted to keep 500 of
Mhm.
it for additional contingency money for like radios, furniture, for the
Right.
5 offices they forgot
Mhm.
about. And then I put down here 800,000 available for sales and use
Yeah.
tax awards.
Right. And now, whether you did that all at once, or whether you wanted that to occur over 2 years, you know, if you want that to last another 2 years, meaning, because we fund half to half, so what you're funding right now is half of 19 and half of 20.
Mhm.
If you wanted that to finish all of 20 and or even get you into somewhat of 2021, you would need to divide that 800 up accordingly. So if you wanted to get it through all the way to the end of 2020 calendar year, meaning December, you should, roughly consider maybe 500,000 to spend. If you want to get it through to 2020's end of school year, since some of these are school-related programs, you're looking at only 400,000 or so, because you would want to repeat that twice over the course of this, if that is your desire. So anywhere from 400 to 800, depending on how you
Well,
want to
this
handle
one
that.
program is 314,000.
That is
Yeah,
correct.
just for the schools.
Mhm. That's what, this whole list, if I added up correctly, it's around 1.2
The 5?
in requests, the 11, all
Oh,
11.
the 11,
all
okay.
11,
Is
if you added it
1.5?
up. 1.2.
1.2.
So obviously, we can't get to all of them regardless.
Okay.
The Hope Village was an extra, I think, 50,000 that they wanted.
50,892 annually. I think all of these, I don't think there were any one-time costs, that's not true. Free Agents for Recovery had like 5,000 or 8,000 in laptop costs, but
Okay.
everything else is ongoing costs.
Now, are any of these programs, Todd, are they state funded? I mean, are they getting money from the state to do
So
whatever
the
they
town
want to do
hall
here?
to the educational piece, there is talk of the state setting aside money to provide drug education directly through the schools.
The Too Good for Drugs?
Probably
Yes,
different. Is
yeah,
it the
that's
same
number 2.
program?
Well, the schools would get to decide how to use, what programs to implement to achieve that state mandate.
When will they know that? I mean, when will we know that?
it's supposed to be coming with this biennial budget, which means the schools would presumably be ready to act within the coming school year.
Okay.
But again, it's talk right now, nothing is official. Family and community, that particular service would not have any other funding source, and I don't believe they're currently doing that work, so I probably shouldn't have mentioned that.
So that's not different than number 8, because I'm
Number
told-
8 would be by our own probation department, and it is currently additional, and that would all be general fund. Our probation department works very hard to get all the grants that they can.
Right.
Mhm.
So if there is a grant, they're already utilizing it. There are no expected new grants coming out for 2020. Enough is enough, and free agents for recovery. Obviously, there are private faith-based organizations that do provide funding that those agencies could try and go to. That would be for them to pursue, though I'm not familiar with that side of things enough to provide any recommendation. University Hospitals is also receiving a state grant once again, and so that request may not be entirely needed by the county. And then the Hope Drug Court, there is money through the court systems, but it tends to only be startup money. It tends never to be continuing money. So usually you can get 1 year's worth of a program out of them, and since we've already started our program, I doubt we would get anything through the courts for that.
You're talking about Hope Village?
No, that was the number 10, the Hope Drug Court.
Okay.
That's
okay.
Judge Doherty's drug
Okay,
court.
okay, gotcha.
You were about to ask something, Kathleen, did you
I don't remember.
get to it? Okay.
So for Judge Doherty's drug court, that's that drug court probation officer, right?
Correct, it's a probation officer whose sole work is to deal with these people. They have additional meetings and all those type of things that goes through the drug court that he facilitates.
So that's a salary, the 55,000.
Correct,
So-
that's his
And that's with
current salary.
benefits and everything?
You know what, to be honest, that seems low if it includes healthcare.
That's what I thought.
Certainly that would be healthcare or salary and, PERs and that type of thing. I can double check that for you. And he may be, if he's single, that very well could be the number.
Okay. Now, is he also working for probation? I mean, is he working?
Well, he is a probation officer through the
Okay.
probation department.
Okay.
But he has been assigned
Okay.
to the drug court, and those
Okay.
are the only cases he handles.
Okay. Now, these Scram requests,
Mhm.
it seems like we always provide when they need.
So there's
more.
2 types of scram. The one scram is house arrest.
Mhm.
The other scram X is where there's a geotab or whatever you want to call associated with it, where the courts can track where they've been.
Okay.
And it costs a little more to get that because it's constant, it's basically a cell phone bill for every bracelet.
Mhm.
But the courts like that because they can see if they've gone to some of those old places that are perhaps highly suspicious for.
Well, they could do things at
Activity.
home though, right?
Certainly, there's a way around it, where there's a will, there's a way. But that was the idea of adding these Scram X's. The courts currently fund the Scram bracelets mostly for the alcohol and the impaired driving people. And that takes up almost the entirety of our Scram funding. However, because they're familiar with this system and it's in place, they were hoping to add the Scram X piece for the drug offenders. Scram itself tests alcohol, but it doesn't test opioids. However, again, with the X piece where they can track their locations, it gives them at least a better idea of where they're going, where they said, and whether they're staying away from areas where they used to go. That's one of the hardest things in drug addictions, breaking away from the old groups that you used to hang
Yeah,
out with.
well, I'm assuming, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'm assuming if we don't fund it through sales and use tax, they're gonna be coming to us through the general fund
Yeah,
because
last year when
they've
we
had-
funded that, we did provide a caveat that we would like to see them increase fees, and they did increase fees. My understanding, though, is the service also got increased, so we roughly broke even. Whether the courts would be willing to continue to increase fees or not, I'm not sure, but the courts have always been very cooperative in trying to
Yeah.
find the alternative funding where they can. But right now, their fees are not able to cover this much, basically,
Okay.
of what they asked for.
You know, I'm surprised some of these that have come back to us, you know, we told them that there's no guarantee from year to year, that none of them, it looks like they're asking for the same amounts, that they haven't tried to find other sources or means to contribute towards this.
Yeah, and that, on the one side, is disappointing. On the other side, to be fair, there is not a lot of money for these type of things. The world and community at large was very, very far behind the opioids in particular. There's a lot of funding associated with other aspects of problems, but opioid addiction and drug addiction and some of the severity that goes with it, just, there isn't money out there to get. In part because it was so overwhelming, what little money there was quickly exhausted. So the caveat then is for people to pick up these programs, it comes from their general funds as well, which obviously was a great burden for them as it is for us.
This is not an easy decision at all.
No.
I mean, I know that we would like to fund everything, I mean, if money was no.
Well, and that's, we've commented before, individually, they all sound wonderful. It's when you list them together and you have to eliminate some that, you know, it's not that they're bad ideas, it's just we can only do what we can do. And part of our consideration is there other sources and places that can provide the same service or should be providing the same service? None of these are a mandate upon the county. They are services the commissioners have felt are important for our citizens to receive, but when push comes to shove, they are not required, and our money has to go to requirements first.
And the other effect is, you know, like you said, are we gonna try to stretch this out over 2-year period since we're almost halfway through, especially like those school funded ones, or? So what do you think about the Hope Village one time? You said the only downside is they can only,
It's
that
a
money
one-time
can
thing, I
only
think.
be used to.
If it goes through the courts or the sheriff, you can only use it while the person is in our system. Meaning the day they're released from jail, they're no longer eligible to receive the services via these funds.
But these services are while they're incarcerated.
Correct, and so
They have
the only thing I didn't
they
know
have
is
a
if there's
different
follow-up.
program. Yeah, they have
So
a
that would
different
be
program
eligible.
that they fund for the follow-up, the transitional piece. This
Yeah.
actually gets them working towards it, cause they teach classes out there every week.
Yeah.
Ted had me come and sit in one of the classes, and I know one of his things is, you know, they put in the proposal was, you know, about the inmates having options. Right
And
now,
that was,
they don't really have.
the only question I had was whether this money is going to provide on top of what they already do, or if they are trying to displace this, having us pay for services they currently do so they can do other services elsewhere. It was difficult to read within the proposal how you would verify whether we actually got more service than we're currently getting. I mean, that becomes the question, if we're already getting some of the service, how much more do we want to pay to get how much more of the service?
Yeah.
Right, this is just so much verbiage on this. There's 2 Scram X.
The municipal courts and the common police courts.
Right,
The
where's the-
two, I think, totaled
One is
118.
number 9, where's the other one that's the Scram?
They were
X?
combined on
Oh.
Joanne's list.
Okay.
That's the muni and the, is that correct, Joanne?
Well, she's got
7 is the felony
Oh,
scram.
there's the, yeah, that's the
And
common
9 is the
police.
muni scram.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're
Okay,
broken
got
down
it.
by
So this is
courts.
Scram X on 7, Joanne?
Yes, yeah, that's
Okay,
also.
Scram X, okay.
And that mostly covers the service fee on these bracelets,
Mhm.
that allows for that radio monitoring. If you want to proceed today, do you want to start with your top 3 choices each and see where the overlap is, or do you want to hold off, or?
You know, although it's a lot of money, I really like that, the school, Portage schools,
Portage
yeah, the
schools.
$314,000.
Mhm.
The superintendents have just been so good about coming to
Communicating
us
with
and
us.
giving us results and they seem I really, but like I said, that's a lot of money when we don't have
A lot to work
give out,
with.
right, but I do like that Portage schools.
And it should be pointed out, that one does not just help the kids, that counselor does reach out to the families as
Mhm.
well,
Right.
you've
Oh,
heard the
right.
examples.
Exactly, and the superintendents have given us examples
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah, that's probably my number one, is that.
For Sabrina also. Kathleen, did you have it?
I feel similarly.
So Portage Schools is number 1 amongst the
Yeah.
3 of you.
And then I really think we need to fund the Scram X's for the muni and the common police courts.
And that's 7 and 9. right?
Yeah. I guess I look at them as the same, it's,
Yeah.
even though they're broke down by courts.
So you're at almost 375,000 already. Is your desire to stay within 400 so that you do have it available for later, or not?
What would that be for later, Todd?
So right now, because we got a late start when we started this, the funding is from roughly July to July. So if you provide the requests that are currently presented here, it would get these entities to June of 2020.
So the schools, if we,
Which that would cover the school year,
so July to July?
July 1st to June 30th is
Of
roughly
next
what
year.
our funding calendar on this particular program is.
And then what are the others? So that,
They're all roughly that same time frame. Some of them got started in August, but
Okay.
roughly, we're talking mid-year to mid-year. So the question is whether you want to finish some of these, like the Scram X, all the way through to 2020. That would take
the end of
another
the year,
half
another
of an
half
installment. Or similarly for the schools, if you wanted to fund one more school year, meaning the 2020 to 2021 school year, then obviously that would take a whole allotment to go into July of 2021.
Yeah, but that would be like 628,000, right? To do 2 more years? If we're going
To
from
get you
this
to
June
mid-2021.
to July,
Correct. That's gonna
yeah.
take 375,000. But that, I guess, so here's to me where it ties in, is whether we're going to ballot with this initiative possibly in May or November of next year. Do you want these programs ending at the exact same time you're trying to go to voters saying this is what it's getting? Or do you want to be able to fund them at least until the ballot initiative is decided?
Well, I
That's my reason for saying you might want to try for the 2019-20 or 2020-2021 school year as well. But that's up for you.
So are you ruling out ballot for this year in November?
No,
Oh.
I'm just saying if it would come to being on the ballot next
Again,
year,
next year.
would you want some money to at least continue the funding until the voters have decided? Either continuing it through December, which would be half the school year, that would be reasonable, I think,
I
or
think that would be
at
more
least getting the whole school year covered.
logical, because if it doesn't pass it, we're not gonna have money to fund those at all.
Correct, other than what you've saved would be what you
Yeah.
have left to spend.
we don't need to decide that with these
No.
funding decisions necessarily.
Other
Is
than,
that
do you
right?
keep funding, I guess that kind of couples in with how much of that 800 do you want to spend all at
Spend
once
now.
versus save? That's the
Mhm.
logic of possibly saving some.
Okay.
Most of these others, you still have time, if you wanted to add them in the coming months. I guess we're in the May already.
Yeah.
When did we say the funding would start? July 30th or May 30th? I can't remember. In the proposal.
Would be July,
July
would be the
1st.
July 1st,
Is what
is
we
the June
indicated.
30th, yeah.
You know, people are always happy to hear they're getting money, even if it's the last minute.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
adding's never a problem, you don't wanna add and then take off once if you change your mind.
Right now, we're up to $376,500.
Do you wanna go with that for now? Was there another,
Okay, so we've done Portage Schools, we've said that one.
314 and the 2 scrams?
And 2 scrams.
I think that makes sense.
Mhm.
Proceed with this list for now. Do
And
you want,
What about, now how do we notify, like, I understand how we notify the people that are not getting funding, but what about like the drug court probation? I know it's sort of
that would be an
wonky
email directly
because-
from the commissioners, because that's direct funding, they would get a budget amendment, which I could bring that Thursday as well.
Well, do we
the-
wanna tell them they're not being funded now, right now? I mean, cause,
Well, that's why I'm asking, because once they
So-
hear funding's out,
They'll have
we're gonna
calls.
start getting calls.
but,
Well,
Yeah.
is his funding, the drug persons, for drug court, is that through the end of this year though already?
That's through August-ish, end of August, I
Okay.
believe, would be his.
Yeah, they were a little later.
So I guess you have a couple options. You can only let the people know they are funded. You could equally, if we want to go through this list, if there's some you definitely don't want to address, we could definitely give them their no answers now. And then the others, we could stay,
neutral.
pending further
Yeah.
consideration. That does leave them hanging, but again, hanging may be better than a no right now, unless you feel it is a no right now, in which case we could say you are funded, and as of right now, you are not. With the caveat being that should you decide to add them, they would be delighted to hear that, even though they were depressed to do they weren't at first.
So with the 3 that we have looked at, which the 2 scrams are considered 1, but we're counting them as 3, it's 369,440, is that what you've got, Todd?
376-ish, yeah.
500, 376,500.
Okay, I must have missed something.
The 37,500, 25,000, and 314.
Okay, on the one I've got 17,345 and 28,095.
Where'd you get 17?
On adult probation felony scram, common
Is
police
that their
court.
remainder?
Budget request 17,345.
The 17,345
That was the
was the
new-
remainder of what they got last year that they didn't use.
Oh, so that's not.
No,
okay,
25, yeah.
And there's no plus because I verified that with Kathy.
So is their request 17,345 then?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Oh, it
So that
is.
changes it then.
So yeah, so that takes you down to
So where did we
360.
get the sales and use tax 218, or 2018 awards? Although that's what they got awarded.
Right.
Yes.
These were the award amounts and they got a late start in the year and only spent so much, so they were only asking for what was left over from last year.
Mhm. So the schools though are still asking for 314, is that right?
And then 17,345 and 28,095.
What was that, I think 17?
I think it's 369,440. I think, I just did that.
What was the 17? 17?
That's the scram X on common
17,345.
pleas, number 7.
17?
345.